The quantum sensors of the Nexus Collective's deep space research vessel hummed with an unusual vibration. Senior researcher Kolvard leaned closer to the holographic display, his six-fingered hands moving with practiced precision across the crystalline interface. Streams of data cascaded around him, painting a picture of a distant solar system that should have been nothing more than another unremarkable point of light in the vast cosmic darkness. But this system was different. The planet they called Earth had caught the collective's attention months ago during a routine long-range scan. Initial reports classified it as a Type 3 developing civilization, primitive, resource-rich, and ripe for systematic acquisition. Most research vessels would have logged the coordinates and moved on, but something about this world triggered a deeper investigation. Kolvar's specialized scanner continued to probe the planet's surface, revealing layers of complexity that defied the standard classification. The planet's inhabitants displayed an unusual technological and social signature. Their communication networks were a chaotic mesh of electromagnetic signals, their technological development wildly inconsistent. In some areas, they used rudimentary combustion engines. In others, they manipulated quantum principles with surprising sophistication. "Interesting," he muttered, adjusting the scanner's resolution. The Nexus Collective had conquered countless civilizations across 5 galactic sectors. Their methodology was precise, efficient, and ultimately unstoppable. Planets were assessed, resources were extracted, and populations were either integrated or eliminated, always with cold, calculated precision. But something about Earth felt different. A holographic projection materialized beside Kolvar, displaying the profile of Supreme Strategist Zora 9. Her crystalline eyes reflected decades of successful planetary acquisitions, each conquest a testament to the collective's technological superiority. "Report," she commanded, her voice a razor-sharp frequency that cut through the ship's ambient noise. Kolvar highlighted several anomalous data streams. The planet demonstrates remarkable adaptive capabilities. Their technological development is non-linear. They simultaneously possess primitive and advanced technologies. More intriguingly, their communication networks suggest a highly dynamic social structure. Zara 9's projection moved closer to the holographic representation of Earth. Her fingers traced the planet's geopolitical boundaries, analyzing potential invasion vectors. "Potential resistance. Minimal," Kolvar responded. "Their current defensive capabilities are fragmented. Multiple independent nation-states with varying technological capabilities. Their weapons would be inconsequential against our standard invasion protocols." Yet something in the data made Kolvar hesitate. He isolated several unusual data streams, recorded instances of human problem-solving that defied standard predictive models. A species that could transform limitations into opportunities. A civilization that seemed to thrive on unpredictability. The Supreme Strategist had already made her decision. Earth would become another acquisition in the Collective's expanding galactic portfolio. Its mineral-rich core, diverse biological resources, and strategic location made it a prime target. The invasion would follow standard protocol: total system suppression, resource extraction, potential population integration. What the Nexus Collective did not understand, could not understand, was the true nature of human potential. Kolvar watched as invasion preparation sequences began to initialize. Massive construction arrays would soon begin assembling the invasion fleet. Quantum weapon systems calibrated, subspace transportation networks aligned. Everything calculated with mathematical precision. Yet buried deep in the data streams, almost invisible to the Collective's advanced algorithms, something stirred. A spark of potential. A hint of something the coldly rational alien civilization could not comprehend. The humans called it hope. The Nexus Collective would soon learn to call it something else entirely. As the first invasion modules began to take shape in the massive shipyards orbiting a distant neutron star, no one noticed the subtle variations in the predictive algorithms. No one saw the microscopic deviations that would, in time, transform this seemingly routine planetary acquisition into something far more complex. The countdown to first contact had begun. The first wave of Nexus Collective ships tore through Earth's atmosphere like crystalline daggers of light. Their quantum displacement drives created massive electromagnetic pulses that turned entire city communication networks into silent graveyards of dead technology. In Washington, the Emergency Command Center erupted into controlled chaos. General Rebecca Martinez watched as multiple screens flickered with catastrophic imagery. Major metropolitan areas across the globe were being systematically targeted. New York, Beijing, London, Mumbai, Tokyo. Each city experiencing simultaneous attacks designed to paralyze human infrastructure. "We're losing communication with major defense networks," shouted a young communication specialist, her fingers flying across multiple holographic interfaces. The alien ships were nothing like anything humanity had ever encountered. They moved with impossible precision, their exterior surfaces shifting and adapting like liquid crystal, absorbing and redirecting energy weapons almost instantaneously. Traditional missile defense systems might as well have been throwing pebbles at a hurricane. Halfway across the world, Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez watched from a secret underground research facility in the Andes Mountains. As a leading expert in adaptive technologies, he recognized something unique about the invasion's initial approach. These weren't random attacks. They were calculated surgical strikes, designed to maximize psychological impact while minimizing resource destruction. "They want the planet intact," he muttered to himself, reviewing the initial attack patterns. Complete systemic shutdown without total planetary destruction. The first hours of the invasion revealed the Nexus Collective's strategic brilliance. By targeting communication infrastructure, transportation networks, and key government installations, they effectively decapitated human organizational capabilities. Military bases went dark, satellite networks collapsed. Global positioning systems became useless streams of random data. But humanity had something the Nexus Collective could not predict: resilience. In underground bunkers, backup communication centers sprang to life. Amateur radio operators became critical communication nodes. Civilian networks, typically fragmented by national boundaries, began to merge and adapt with surprising speed. Where official channels failed, impromptu communication systems emerged. General Martinez watched her tactical maps transform. What should have been a complete systemic collapse was instead becoming a distributed network of resistance. Military units that survived the initial strike began implementing contingency protocols developed during decades of theoretical global conflict scenarios. "They're treating us like a centralized system," Dr. Rodriguez said during an encrypted communication with military leadership. "But we're anything but centralized. Our weakness is actually our strength." The invasion's second wave began targeting power grids. Massive energy weapons descended from the crystalline ships, designed to completely disable electrical infrastructure. But something unexpected happened. Local power systems, instead of collapsing entirely, began to fragment and redistribute. Microgrids, solar installations, and emergency backup systems created a resilient network that defied the aliens' predictive models. In rural areas, communities that had already developed off-grid capabilities became unexpected bastions of resistance. Small towns with local renewable energy systems continued to function while major cities went dark. Agricultural communities with decentralized communication systems maintained their operational capabilities. The Nexus Collective had conquered countless civilizations. Their technological models predicted complete societal collapse within hours of a primary strike. Humanity was supposed to be a simple calculation, a resources-rich planet waiting to be systematically integrated. But human beings were not a predictable equation. As the first day of invasion concluded, the Nexus Collective found themselves confronting a species that refused to follow any expected pattern of resistance. Where they anticipated total surrender, they instead encountered adaptive complexity. In the research facility, Dr. Rodriguez began compiling initial invasion data. His team, a diverse group of scientists from around the globe, started identifying potential technological counterstrategies. They weren't just defending. They were learning, adapting, preparing to fight back. The invasion had begun, but humanity was far from defeated. Supreme Strategist Zera-9, monitoring the invasion from her distant command ship, noticed something unusual in the predictive algorithms. For the first time in her extensive career, the mathematical models showed unexpected variables, slight deviations that suggested this conquest might not proceed as smoothly as anticipated. Humanity's true battle was just beginning. The Global Research Response Center emerged from the most unexpected collaboration in human history. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez found himself leading a team that defied every traditional scientific boundary. Engineers from Silicon Valley worked alongside quantum physicists from Beijing. Cybersecurity experts from Tel Aviv collaborated with mechanical engineers from Mumbai, and military strategists from various nations set aside generations of conflict. Their first breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Elena Kovacs, a Hungarian systems engineer previously working on blockchain technologies, discovered a critical insight. The alien communication networks relied on a quantum entanglement protocol that assumed linear information processing. Human communication, messy, emotional, deeply non-linear, created interference patterns the alien systems couldn't predict. They see information as a perfect mathematical equation, Elena explained during an emergency global briefing. We see it as a living, breathing ecosystem. In a converted underground research facility beneath the Andes, the team began developing their first adaptive counter-technology. Traditional electronic warfare techniques would be useless against the Nexus Collective's advanced systems. They needed something fundamentally different. Dr. Rodriguez mapped out their approach on massive holographic displays. Each potential strategy was a complex web of interconnected possibilities, constantly shifting and adapting. The research team worked in rotating shifts, their communication network spanning multiple continents and operating beyond traditional military or scientific hierarchies. Meanwhile, the invasion continued. Alien landing parties began establishing occupation zones in strategic global locations. They expected to find a defeated, fragmented human population. Instead, they encountered something far more complex. Local resistance groups emerged with surprising sophistication. In rural areas of Brazil, indigenous communities used their deep understanding of local terrain to create sophisticated guerrilla communication networks. In the mountains of Afghanistan, technological improvisation reached new heights as local groups repurposed communication equipment in ways no standard manual could predict. The Nexus Collective had conquered civilizations across multiple star systems. Their technological model suggested that any resistance would be fragmented, predictable, easily crushed. But humanity operated on a fundamentally different principle. We're not fighting to win, Dr. Rodriguez told his team. We're fighting to adapt. Their first experimental counter-technology looked nothing like a weapon. It was a complex algorithmic system designed to create deliberate chaos in the alien communication networks. By introducing carefully crafted interference patterns, they could potentially disrupt the precise quantum communication protocols the invaders relied upon. Elena Kovacs demonstrated the initial prototype, a series of seemingly random signal patterns that, when analyzed together, created a type of informational white noise. But it was more than simple interference. Each signal carried carefully encoded information, a digital Trojan horse designed to exploit the aliens' rigid communication systems. The global research team worked with an urgency that transcended national boundaries. Military personnel provided tactical insights. Scientists developed theoretical frameworks. Software engineers created adaptive algorithms. Each group brought a unique perspective, creating a solution that was greater than the sum of its parts. General Rebecca Martinez oversaw the tactical implementation. Her military background taught her the importance of unconventional thinking. The old rules of warfare no longer applied. This was a conflict that would be won through innovation, not traditional combat. In orbit, the Nexus Collective began to notice unusual disruptions in their communication networks. Predictive algorithms started showing inexplicable variations. Information patterns became less stable, more chaotic. For the first time, the invaders experienced something close to uncertainty. The experimental counter-technology wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a form of informational judo, using the invaders' own communication strengths against them. Each disruption created more potential points of interference, slowly destabilizing their complex technological systems. As the first successful test of their adaptive algorithm completed, the research team watched in quiet anticipation. They had created something unprecedented, a defense mechanism that was alive, evolving, constantly changing. The invasion had reached a critical turning point, and humanity was just beginning to show its true potential. Dr. Rodriguez looked at the complex holographic display, a slight smile crossing his face. The Nexus Collective had come to conquer, but they were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was never its technology. It was its ability to transform. The breakthrough came from an unexpected confluence of technologies and human creativity. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez's team had been working for weeks, analyzing every scrap of data from the initial alien communication intercepts. What they discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. Deep within the captured alien communication logs, a pattern emerged that defied conventional understanding. The Nexus Collective's entire technological infrastructure relied on a singular, complex quantum communication network. It was elegant, efficient, and, as the human researchers were beginning to understand, critically vulnerable. Zera 9, monitoring the invasion from her command ship, first noticed the anomalies during a routine system diagnostic. Microscopic disruptions began appearing in their communication matrices. At first, they seemed like minor technical glitches, the kind that could be recalibrated with standard maintenance protocols. But these were no ordinary disruptions. In a converted research facility beneath the ends, Alina Kovacs worked with a team of cryptographers, quantum physicists, and cybersecurity experts. They had discovered something profound about the alien communication system. The Nexus Collective's technology operated on a principle of absolute predictability. Every communication, every decision, every tactical movement was based on complex, but ultimately deterministic algorithms. Humans, by contrast, were fundamentally unpredictable. It's not about breaking their system, Alina explained during a global encrypted briefing. It's about introducing enough variability to make their entire network unstable. The team developed a sophisticated viral algorithm designed to exploit the aliens' rigid communication protocols. Unlike traditional computer viruses, this was a living, adaptive piece of code that could modify itself in real time. Each interaction with the alien network would cause the algorithm to learn, adapt, and become more effective. Major General Rebecca Martinez oversaw the tactical implementation. Military communication specialists worked alongside civilian hackers, creating a distributed network of information warfare unlike anything in human history. They weren't just defending. They were actively probing, learning, transforming. The first successful test came during a routine alien communication sweep. The adaptive algorithm infiltrated the quantum communication network, introducing subtle variations that went unnoticed at first. It was like a microscopic organism slowly spreading through a complex biological system, changing how information flowed. On the ground, the effects became apparent quickly. Alien landing parties began to experience communication disruptions. Tactical coordination became incrementally more difficult. Precise strike formations started to show hairline fractures of inefficiency. The Nexus Collective had conquered countless civilizations. Their technological models predicted absolute control with mathematical certainty, but they had never encountered a species quite like humans, a civilization that turned unpredictability into a form of strategic advantage. In orbit, the alien command ships began to detect strange anomalies. Communication lag times increased. Tactical synchronization became incrementally more challenging. What should have been a perfectly choreographed invasion started to show signs of systemic stress. Dr. Rodriguez watched the data streams with a mixture of scientific fascination and strategic calculation. The team had created something more than a weapon. It was a living technological ecosystem that could adapt, learn, and transform in real time. The global research team worked in shifts, continuously monitoring and refining their approach. Scientists from different disciplines brought unique perspectives. A marine biologist suggested insights based on how complex ecosystems adapt. A musician provided mathematical models about pattern disruption. A child psychologist offered perspectives on nonlinear problem-solving. Zara 9 realized something was wrong when the first major communication disruption occurred. An entire tactical squadron lost coordination during a planned assault. The precision that had defined the Nexus Collective's military might was slowly being eroded by something they could not comprehend: unpredictability. As the fourth day of invasion concluded, the Nexus Collective found themselves confronting a fundamental challenge to their entire technological philosophy. Humanity was not a problem to be solved through mathematical precision. Humanity was a dynamic, living system that transformed challenges into opportunities. The real invasion was just beginning, and the humans were just getting started. Psychological warfare became humanity's most unexpected weapon. The global communication team, led by Dr. Elena Kovacs and a diverse group of linguists, psychologists, and communication experts, discovered something extraordinary about the Nexus Collective's communication protocols. Their entire societal structure was built on absolute certainty, a rigid framework of predictive algorithms and mathematical precision that left no room for emotional nuance. Humans were about to change that completely. Using the adaptive communication algorithm developed in the previous weeks, the team began broadcasting carefully constructed messages directly into the alien communication networks. These weren't traditional military communications or simple propaganda. They were complex psychological constructs designed to introduce uncertainty, doubt, and emotional complexity. The first transmission targeted the lower-level operational units of the invasion force. It was a masterpiece of psychological engineering. Messages that highlighted the potential futility of their mission, subtle hints of internal discord within the collective's leadership, and carefully crafted narratives that played on the smallest potential weaknesses in their collective consciousness. Major General Rebecca Martinez watched the initial results with cautious optimism. The military had never attempted psychological warfare on this scale before. Traditional psychological operations seemed primitive compared to this sophisticated approach. On the alien command ship, communication disruptions became more frequent. What the Nexus Collective interpreted as technical glitches were actually carefully designed psychological interventions. Each message was a precision instrument, crafted to introduce microscopic cracks in their absolute certainty. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez explained the approach during an encrypted global briefing. "We're not just fighting a technological war," he said, his holographic image appearing in research centers around the world. "We're fighting a war of perception. The collective views the universe as a perfect mathematical equation. We're going to show them that equations have exceptions." The psychological warfare team included experts from disciplines that seemed unrelated at first glance: a game theory specialist from Singapore, a narrative designer from Nigeria, a conflict resolution expert from Colombia, a quantum psychologist from India. Each brought a unique perspective to the complex challenge of disrupting an alien civilization's collective mindset. Their first major breakthrough came unexpectedly. They discovered that the Nexus Collective's lower-level operational units had the smallest capacity for independent thought. By introducing subtle narrative threads that questioned the absolute nature of their mission, they could create microscopic fissures of doubt. One transmission suggested the possibility of alternative mission parameters. Another hinted at potential leadership failures in previous conquests. Each message was designed to be just plausible enough to create uncertainty, yet complex enough to avoid immediate detection. In the occupied zones on Earth, human resistance groups began to adapt this approach locally. Resistance was no longer about direct confrontation. It became a sophisticated dance of information, perception, and psychological manipulation. Zara 9 first noticed the problem during a routine system diagnostic. Communication efficiency had dropped by 0.03%, an almost imperceptible change that would have been insignificant in any other context. But in the Nexus Collective's perfectly calibrated system, it was like a hairline fracture in a perfect crystal. The psychological warfare team worked in continuous shifts. They weren't just sending messages. They were creating a living, breathing narrative ecosystem. Each transmission was carefully analyzed, its impact measured and incorporated into subsequent communications. A linguist from Brazil discovered that human languages, with their inherent ambiguity, metaphorical complexity, and emotional depth, could be weaponized in ways the collective could never understand. Poetic fragments, philosophical questions, emotional narratives. These became more powerful than any traditional weapon. The aliens had come expecting the straightforward conquest. Instead, they found themselves confronting a species that could transform perception itself into a weapon. As the fifth day of invasion concluded, something unprecedented began to happen. Small units within the invasion force started to show signs of hesitation. Tactical efficiency dropped. Communication became incrementally less precise. The Nexus Collective was experiencing something they had never encountered before: doubt. And humanity was just getting started. The total counterattack began with a symphony of human innovation. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez stood in the underground command center, watching as multiple global systems aligned in an unprecedented display of human cooperation. What had started as isolated resistance efforts had transformed into a coordinated global response that defied every predictive model the Nexus Collective had developed. Their target was the massive mothership orbiting Earth, the central command vessel that coordinated the entire invasion fleet. Traditional military strategies would have suggested a direct assault. Humanity had something far more sophisticated in mind. The plan involved a multi-layered approach that combined technological warfare, psychological manipulation, and pure human creativity. Elena Kovacs had been working on the core strategy for weeks, drawing from her background in complex systems and quantum communication. "We're not going to destroy their ship," she explained during the final briefing. "We're going to make it irrelevant." The first phase began with a global network of modified communication arrays. These weren't traditional weapons, but sophisticated signal generators designed to create a cascading effect of quantum interference. Scientists from research centers around the world had transformed everyday technologies into precision instruments of technological warfare. In the occupied zones, local resistance groups played a critical role. They weren't just fighting. They were gathering intelligence, creating micro-disruptions, and feeding information back to the global research team. A network of amateur radio operators, community networks, and improvised communication systems became as important as any military communication channel. Major General Rebecca Martinez oversaw the tactical implementation. The military had transformed from a hierarchical command structure to a fluid, adaptive network. Traditional chain of command gave way to a more dynamic approach that could respond to changing circumstances with lightning speed. The mothership represented the pinnacle of Nexus Collective technological achievement, a massive crystalline structure that could obliterate entire planetary defense systems with a single energy discharge. But its very complexity became its greatest weakness. As the interference patterns began to take effect, something extraordinary happened. The ship's quantum communication network started to experience microscopic disruptions. At first, they were barely noticeable, tiny fluctuations that would have been imperceptible to any other technological system. But the Nexus Collective system was built on absolute precision. Each microscopic disruption created a cascade of uncertainty. Communication protocols became incrementally less efficient. Tactical synchronization began to fail. The perfect mathematical equation that had defined their technological superiority started to show hairline fractures. The research team had discovered something profound about the alien technology. Its greatest strength, absolute predictability, was also its critical vulnerability. By introducing just enough uncertainty, they could transform the entire system's functionality. Zara 9 first noticed the problem during a routine system diagnostic. Communication efficiency had dropped by 0.05%, an almost imperceptible change that would have been insignificant in any other context. But in the Nexus Collective's perfectly calibrated system, it was like a massive structural failure. The counterattack wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. Local resistance groups began to play a critical role. In the mountains of Afghanistan, a group of engineers repurposed communication equipment in ways no manual could have predicted. In the dense forests of Brazil, indigenous communities used their deep understanding of local terrain to create sophisticated guerrilla communication networks. Each resistance group became a node in a living, breathing technological ecosystem. They weren't just fighting. They were learning, adapting, transforming. As the sixth day of invasion concluded, the mothership began to experience systemic failures. Communication networks became less precise. Tactical coordination started to break down. The perfect mathematical model that had defined the Nexus Collective's technological superiority was being dismantled from within. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had turned the invaders' greatest strength into their ultimate weakness, and they were just getting started. On the mothership, for the first time in the Collective's history, something close to uncertainty began to take hold. Humanity had transformed warfare into an art of possibility. The final confrontation arrived with a silence more profound than any battle cry. Admiral Zera 9 realized the true nature of their defeat long before the actual moment of surrender. The Nexus Collective's massive mothership, once a symbol of absolute technological superiority, now drifted like a wounded leviathan in Earth's orbit. Its crystalline surfaces, previously shifting with impossible precision, now flickered with uncertainty. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez watched from the underground command center, surrounded by a global team that represented the most diverse coalition in human history. They had done something unprecedented, not just defending against an invasion, but fundamentally challenging an entire civilization's technological and philosophical understanding. The mothership's quantum communication network had become a living testament to human ingenuity. What had started as microscopic disruptions had transformed into a complete systemic breakdown. The Collective's rigid algorithmic thinking could not comprehend the adaptive, non-linear approach humanity had developed. Elena Kovacs explained the breakthrough during the final strategic meeting. "We didn't just fight," she said, her voice calm and precise. "We reimagined the entire concept of conflict." The global research team had created more than a defensive strategy. They had developed a completely new approach to technological interaction, a method of communication and conflict resolution that transformed the very understanding of intelligence and adaptation. Major General Rebecca Martinez oversaw the final stages of the confrontation. Military strategy had evolved from traditional combat models to a fluid, adaptive network that responded to changing circumstances with unprecedented speed. Each resistance group, each local network, had become a critical node in a living, breathing technological ecosystem. On the mothership, Admiral Zera 9 experienced something the Nexus Collective had never encountered: genuine uncertainty. Their entire civilization was built on predictive models, mathematical certainties, and absolute control. Humanity had introduced a fundamental variable that their systems could not process: the ability to transform limitation into opportunity. The resistance had spread far beyond traditional military responses. In the mountains of Peru, a group of indigenous engineers repurposed communication equipment in ways no standard manual could predict. In the dense forests of Central Africa, local communities created sophisticated communication networks that operated on principles of ecological adaptation. Each transmission, each interaction, became a complex dance of information and possibility. The humans weren't just resisting, they were reimagining the entire concept of technological interaction. The mothership's systems began to fail in ways that defied conventional understanding. Communication protocols broke down. Tactical networks became unreliable. The perfect mathematical equation that had defined the Collective's technological superiority was being dismantled from within. Dr. Rodriguez understood the profound nature of their victory. This wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to existence, one based on adaptation, creativity, and the power of collective imagination. As the seventh day of invasion concluded, the Nexus Collective faced a choice that would define their entire civilization. Surrender was not just a tactical decision. It was a philosophical transformation. The global communication team prepared their final transmission. It wasn't a declaration of victory or a demand for surrender. Instead, it was an invitation, a complex message that contained layers of scientific, philosophical, and emotional complexity. We are humanity. The message read, "Our strength is not in our weapons, but in our ability to adapt, to imagine, to transform." On the mothership, Admiral Zera 9 understood something profound. The invasion had failed not because of technological superiority, but because of a fundamental misunderstanding of what intelligence truly meant. Humanity had shown that true strength was not about control, but about the ability to change, to grow, to reimagine possibilities. The massive crystalline ship began to power down. Not in defeat, but in a moment of profound realization. The invasion was over, but humanity's true journey was just beginning. The world transformed in the aftermath of the invasion. What had begun as a global catastrophe became humanity's most profound moment of collective awakening. The research facilities that had emerged during the conflict didn't disband. Instead, they evolved into global innovation centers that reimagined every aspect of human potential. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez stood before the United Global Council, presenting the technological discoveries that had emerged from the resistance. The captured alien technology was more than a military trophy. It was a gateway to understanding fundamental principles of quantum communication, energy transfer, and adaptive systems. "We didn't just survive," he told the assembled representatives from every corner of the globe. "We discovered something about ourselves." The invasion had accomplished something the Nexus Collective could never have anticipated. Humanity's fractured nations, historical conflicts, and cultural divisions had been transformed by the shared experience of resistance. Global cooperation was no longer an ideal. It was a lived reality. Elena Kovacs led the team developing new communication technologies. The adaptive algorithms created during the conflict were now being applied to solve some of humanity's most pressing challenges: climate restoration projects, medical research, educational systems. All were being revolutionized by the approach that had defeated the invasion. Major General Rebecca Martinez oversaw the global defense restructuring. Military strategy had been completely reimagined. Traditional hierarchical structures gave way to fluid, adaptive networks that could respond to challenges with unprecedented speed and creativity. The alien mothership, now permanently stationed in Earth's orbit, became a symbol of humanity's transformation. Instead of being destroyed, it was carefully studied, a testament to the decision to approach even a former enemy with curiosity rather than hatred. Zera 9, the former invasion commander, became an unexpected ally. The Nexus Collective's leadership recognized that humanity represented something entirely new in their understanding of intelligent life. Diplomatic channels opened, not as a conquering force, but as a potential partner in galactic exploration. Research centers emerged in unexpected locations: a quantum communication research facility in rural Kenya, an Adaptive Technologies Institute in the Andes Mountains, a global innovation center in Singapore that brought together the most brilliant minds from every continent. The technologies developed during the invasion began to solve challenges that had seemed insurmountable. Medical researchers used the adaptive communication algorithms to develop new approaches to treating complex diseases. Environmental scientists applied the quantum understanding to create more efficient renewable energy systems. Education was completely transformed. Schools became centers of adaptive learning, focusing on creativity, problem-solving, and collaborative innovation. The rigid educational models of the past gave way to dynamic, flexible approaches that celebrated human potential. Dr. Rodriguez reflected on the profound change. The invasion had been humanity's ultimate test, And they had done more than simply survive. They had demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to existence. The global communication network that had been crucial during the resistance became a permanent feature of human civilization. It wasn't just a technological system. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of human potential. Former enemies became partners. Nations that had historical conflicts found common ground. The shared experience of resistance had created bonds that transcended traditional boundaries. In orbit, the massive alien mothership served as a constant reminder of humanity's journey. It was no longer a symbol of invasion, but a beacon of possibility. The Nexus Collective began to send diplomatic missions. They were no longer conquerors but students, eager to understand the species that had transformed their entire understanding of intelligence. "We are humanity" became more than a statement. It was a philosophy, a way of approaching the universe. As the first year after the invasion concluded, humanity looked to the stars with a new perspective. They were no longer a species waiting to be discovered or conquered. They were explorers, innovators, a civilization that could transform any challenge into an opportunity. The invasion had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. And humanity was just getting started.